Yeah, there you go. So we're going over to James chapter 3 to look at this passage, James chapter 3, verses 2 to 12, looking at the second part of what we started last week, and should be able to get enough out. Okay, I'm saying enough out because you can go on talking about this topic really forever. It's a it's a major topic for Christians, for our growth, for our not only our growth but also for our well-being spiritually, our whole sense of ministry. I was just thinking about how that you can hear teachers in different locations admonishing their students, use your words. Use your words. It's a good idea. The only trouble is that when the teachers are talking to the little students, you run into some blocks because little boys are not as talkative as girls are, and they have a little bit harder time expressing what they're going through. And girls, let's say ladies are more loquacious, okay? They talk a little bit more. And so it is still proper to try to get kids to use their words, but sometimes one of the things you're thankful for in little boys is that they like to take care of things in action and to act quickly. And we need that too. But still, words and language is so very important. So we want to realize that in the Christian life, our communications, our speech is so very important. Let's read the passage, James 3, 2 to 12. It says, "For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body." And I think that's an important change there. It's talking about not being offensive, and you would think that you would say that he could be a good diplomat and he could help people to come together, but it doesn't say that. It says he's able to bridle the whole body. And this is a very important concept because our communications also affect our physical well-being. Then he says, "Behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body." That little member defiles the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. "For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. That the fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh." Okay, so when we look at this passage, we read the whole thing because the whole thing is so important. It's not like you just break it down and say, well, let me pull a verse out that's significant. All of it's so very significant. And so we talked last week about how words actually help us to form thoughts. Words and vocabulary comes before thinking. When people have concepts, they can struggle with them. They're trying to think of how to say something when they're called upon, and they don't know quite how to say it. And so as they work and they struggle, they're putting these grammar together. The grammar is helping them order their thoughts because grammar has rules of antecedents and subjects, and so you have all kinds of things that you've got to take into consideration, tenses and things like that. And speaking forces you to order those things, which gives you logical arguments that you can go by. And when people can't do that, then they don't have the thought. They don't have the thought. Proof of it is they sound like Jackie Gleason. Homina, 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 homina. I don't know what to say. Okay, so speech is very critical, and being able to explain things in simple terms to really get the meaning across is so vitally important also. And we talked about how that people think that they're speaking English. They are not. We gave the example when one person says justice, they think that they're talking about criminals getting their just desserts. And somebody else, when they say justice, they think non-criminals are getting just what they don't deserve. They get things taken care of. Two different subjects that they're talking about. Okay, then referred to, and this is where we're going to start up tonight, then there are the things that we do with self-talk, talk that we do with ourselves. There are, most critically, the lies that we tell ourselves to downplay why we shouldn't sin and promote the idea that our sin is right. And self-talk can go into a number of different areas, but I want to cover this one first. Isaiah 5:20-21 says, "Woe unto them that call evil good." They call evil good. Okay, by calling it good, by naming it and putting it to language, that's how they are developing their evil thoughts. And their good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. And so when they're calling evil good and good evil, it reminds me of the issue of propaganda. Propaganda. Propaganda is people just saying things. We all hear about gaslighting, where if you say something often enough, that's the opposite of truth, that people start to think, well, maybe I'm crazy, then maybe it's me. No, it's the gaslighter that's the problem. And so propaganda becomes a very important problem. And we don't want to have our newspapers called Pravda. How many people know what Pravda was? Okay, communist newspaper in Russia. The truth, right? Anything but the truth. And this is why America, with its foundation on freedom of speech, is so important. The way to counteract bad speech is to have more good speech, not shut down the person that's talking. Which makes me think also of how we are ministering to people. We don't want to shut down people talking. When you have a debate going on, you don't want to out-talk them and over-talk them and be able to shut them down. What we need is to help them bring out more things. We are like spiritual midwives. We are theological and communication midwives. When you hear somebody who's arguing, there's a good chance that we might be taking offense at what they're saying. We shouldn't be doing that. Okay, taking offense is not a good thing to do, even if they're being offensive. Even if they're being offensive. Number one, we've got to remember that we've got something to do with the conversation too. And a lot of times we don't know how we necessarily sound, especially in things like emails and texts. I do not like emailing and texts. I use them, I do them. I would rather talk to somebody on the phone. Even more, I'd like to get a little bit more communication out of a person. I would like to see them in person. Okay, you're on a phone, you have an awkward silence. The other person then says, well, I guess we'll get going then. You can't do that very easily when you're talking in person. Okay, and plus you get some body language as well, and you get some communication. Remember, though, that uh, that just like people might not be able to tell what you're saying in an email or a text, okay, you can't tell necessarily what they're saying. So not only um, do we have to be concerned about what they're saying, we have to be concerned about what we're saying also. And so there's a need to improve communications that way. Now, I want to tie this into the idea of being a spiritual midwife, helping people to talk and to share things. There is a method of teaching. It's called the Socratic method. And Socrates would use this, and he was famous for this. And he didn't just teach people what they should think and what there was to know. He would ask them guiding questions so that they could think for themselves. And in answering those, they would start to figure things out by doing that. Because they don't know what they don't know. When they try to say something that they don't know, they're like, oh, I got to think harder. And now things start to occur to them. Okay, our job is to bring things out of people. When you and this is a very key factor when you've got somebody who's being offensive to you. Okay. My job as a preacher is to not just preach, but in ministering to people is to help them figure things out and to say these things. And I know when I'm talking to the boys and I'm sharing things with them, I can tell them things. I'll ask them questions all through the things. Do you get it? What do you get? Can you repeat back to me? Sometimes especially if I have a kid acting up, I say, what did I just say? Okay. And extremely effective for them to be able to now finally hear what was said when they've got to repeat it back. Now it's getting anchored in their consciousness and in their understanding. So we are here to minister to people, especially the ones who are offensive, because they're the ones that need Jesus Christ. They're the ones that need to get to God. Okay, so sometimes it's a question of asking them things. When we're out witnessing, I can just sense that somebody's eyes are sort of glazing over after a little while because there's too much communication. One of the things we do is we ask them questions about what was just said and the concepts and things like that, and they start to get it. Then see, that's when thinking is actually going on, is when they start repeating back, when they start to have to explain things themselves. Sometimes we have to tell people what their own religion says. I can't remember. I was just talking to somebody just recently, and I know who it was. It was that lady from the other day that Nancy and I had run into. And she was talking about how Catholics are, they're so against everything, and they'll say things that their own Catholic Church doesn't actually teach. Sometimes we've got to explain to them what their church teaches so that they can actually finally deal with that. Nancy had an aunt, never heard about transubstantiation, and we're like, how did you miss this? This is like the whole premise of the Mass. And so, there's this need to, when somebody's saying things wrong, it's very possible they don't know they're saying it offensively. It's and it sounds very offensive, and you swear they're being offensive. I've seen many times when they actually don't mean that offense, and when we start to talk, they start to explain themselves further, and they catch themselves and what they're actually saying. So when they ask them to define things, we are also again. So if there's offense, know that your job is to help people come out of that and start to talk so they can figure things out themselves without us just yelling at them. Okay, so Proverbs 25, verse 11 says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. So we want to have fitly spoken words. We want to be careful and thoughtful about the words that we use. This is one of the reasons why having testimonies on a Sunday morning or taking prayer requests, why this is so important is because there are fitly spoken words. People are hearing that and they're getting an idea of the church jargon, and they're learning new vocabularies and new ways of expression, how to fit in. And so that's the benefit of all those testimonies, not just praising the Lord, but helping somebody else to see things that they couldn't quite put into words, but you just did. And that words fitly spoken also has to do with not just our testimonies around each other, but words that help somebody along. You can have a problem that you're talking about with somebody, a problem that you have with them and the way they're being. And you could give a whole thesis of all the things they did wrong and how their logic was wrong and what they should have thought and what they should have done. And about the time you got down to after the first paragraph of your 10-page paper, you lost them, okay? They're thinking not so much of what you're saying, they're trying to think how they're going to give a rebuttal to what you just said. Which is, you got to give them a chance to speak and to actually have an expression about what's going on. And so, instead of going on and giving a thorough explanation so they can really see what's going on, sometimes you just don't even deal with certain problems. What you deal with is the behavioral objective that you're after. And instead of telling them all the things that they did wrong, tell them what they did right and praise them for what they did right. And here's what happens is people say, oh, let me repeat that. Let me do more of that. Now there's a time to do all the kind of communications and places for that. But this is an effective thing to do with people, is to tell them all the good things that you want them to then say, oh, okay, let me turn myself and do that because I want your praise instead of your criticism. Sometimes you have to give the criticism too. You got to be careful. But you got to have a word fitly spoken. This takes thought and education. In a classical education, they had what was called the trivium, which was talking about 3 roads, and they would teach grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and these are all methods of communication. Okay, having good grammar, being able to put things together, having good logic. But then there were rhetorical devices, and these are elements that help speakers. If you look up, just Google this, and I can get you a video that I saved if you ever ask me to it. There's a thing called the power of 3, and the power of 3. Let me see if I can't. Yeah, the power of 3. In fact, okay. Do you see stuff there, Nancy, about communication that's implied? Okay. In literature, there are typically 3 points to be made. There are, with sentences, you don't just use one adjective to describe something, you use 3. I talked about idolatry the other day, and if you look back at the notes, okay, there are exactly three things that I mentioned that are about the idols' names. One of the idols' names is car. Another one, I can't remember exactly what it was, car, hobby, and then there was a third one. I'm just trying to remember it right now. Each of those was a different kind of thing. But there's something about the number three that helps it to help people to pay attention and to get it. You can sound very intelligent if you use three adjectives to describe what the thing that you're talking about. These are, and there are other rhetorical devices that are used to help get people's attention and to be persuasive. There's different kinds of repetition that are used. There are beginning your points each with the same consonant, which is called consonance, by the way, as opposed to alliteration. Okay, these are all techniques that people have in order to be truly thoughtful communicants. Okay, let me see. Okay, so we can with the power of speech and thoughtful speech and trying to study this, we can make headway. Might not be much headway. Okay, this is they have whole courses on this stuff, but in the very act of trying, we can improve our delivery and we can try to help other people express things. Talking about self-talk, still talking about self-talk right now, okay? Not just calling evil good and good evil. How's about the talk that we do like, I'm so bad, you know, just sound like Eeyore on, on Winnie the Pooh. The whole world's banned, what am I gonna do? I'm such a nothing. You know, part of the problem is you might be nothing. So you got to improve that, okay? You do have to be honest with yourself. But a steady diet of negative self-talk is not beneficial. And I'm not talking about being like the little engine that could. Okay, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, and you get up over the hill. I knew I could, I knew I could, I knew I could. Yeah. Don't give me a scalpel and have me say while I'm giving you surgery, I think I can, I think I can. It is not going to work. Remember, never trust my medical advice. I tell you, I do not know what I'm talking about. Okay, I promise you. I don't let me talk to the nurses in the church. Okay, that's who you talk to. Okay, so but on the other hand, neither should we just look for the negative only and reinforce that. There's a time for it, there is a time for it, but there's also a time for the positive stuff. And to figure out what you're going to do and have self-talk for that. Here's what I mean, verbalize it, write it down. Okay, it's a communication to self. I am going to do this tomorrow, I'm going to try that, and I'm going to I'm going to study a little bit more. I intend to pray a little bit more. I intend to read a little bit more. I'm going to do this. You know, these are all self-talk kind of things. Yeah. So these are all things to be careful of. Let me see, how am I doing? Okay, got a couple more minutes here. We want to look at the power of communication also. For instance, the whole King James Version being given to us. English was at its highest stage of development at the time that the King James Version was being translated. And in fact, the Bible, because it was going to be quite a universal book in England and it was going to become a standard, it did become a standard for English. It standardized English. It standardized spellings. It standardized the way things were put. Shakespeare, along with it, in his writings, and he used an awful lot of biblical examples. Okay, so when it comes to communication, truly, as we try to help people express themselves and to guide their expression, especially by questions, Great way to do it. You're asking questions which causes them to have to answer. Okay, it's not just that we teach them and tell them what to think. We also try to get them to express that themselves. We help them to come along towards salvation with our communications with each other. Okay, and if somebody says something negative to you, don't say, I'm offended. Say, it's time for me to go to work, and help them express themselves better, because we are ministering to them. We're all called to do that. Finally, James chapter 1, verses 19 to 20, we want to go back to. It says, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. We don't want to jump the gun and tell people off and let them know how bad they are. Very likely that it's our wrath that's being expressed and not God's wrath. Okay, so we have to be able to give them the chance to speak. So we speak, but give them a chance to speak also. I did want to point out one other thing. I'm thinking of Jesus Christ. Look at how he communicated with a lot of people. He would ask them questions. Why callest thou me good? Okay, made the man start to think about what the definition of good was. And you can see this in a lot of things. Look at him with the woman on the well. Okay, he could have told her everything, okay, but he brought her out by giving her a chance to speak. Let me ask if there are any questions anybody has. See, I did all this talking. I was teaching tonight, okay, so I should give you a chance to say something. Somebody has something to add in here. And by the way, I'm just trying to touch high spots. There's so much more that you can go into. Somebody with a question. Yes, Miss Donna.
Thanking you for that, because when I'm working,
You come up with some offensive people, I'll bet.
no, when I'm working on computer and I'm working on a chart, and I'm like, what, I get up and I start talking to myself. So that is the
case in
truth
point.
of, if I just don't, why are they saying this here and that there? And I just thought I was crazy. But, you know, people heard me, they'd say you're crazy. But thank you for giving me some validity for doing that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You gave them validity. Yes. You helped validate them, and they are now coming to terms with their thinking that they're not so crazy after all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Miss Wilma.
Proverbs 13:3. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth
Yes.
his life. He that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction.